子供たちから大人気だったんだぜ。
一体どんな洗脳教育を受けたらそんな感性になるのよ。
The floor is open to you.
We opened this series with something more akin to the final episode of a Super Sentai, as the superhero team known as the Kizuna 5 stepped up to defeat their requisite evil empire.
Oh, come on, Bokuasu. You already had your chance to defeat a Sentai team, so why don't you just move on?
Yeah, fun fact, a lot of the characters, at least in this world, have VAs who actually got their big breaks by performing in Super Sentai. Which, yeah, at first sounds unusual, but then you remember Giant Bosk exists.
Oh, come on!
Plus, half the time, they are just voice acting whenever the characters put on their suits and switch out with the stunt actors.
Granted, they don't always make the best transitions.
勘違いだ。日曜日は庭の草むしりしようと思ってたんだ。Okay, okay.
Yeah, dude, just stick with being less popular than your brother.
Here, though, we've got actors like the aforementioned priest of the Gotcha Salts, George Nakata, who got his big break by playing the big bad of Choju Sentai Live Man. Kizuna Blue was played by Masaya Matsukaze, who originally played Mega Blue, and became very arguably the most prominent VA of this team, as he would go on to play characters like Kyoya from Oron, Terumi from Death Note, Divine from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and Hagakure from Danganronpa.
One of these things is not like the other.
Kizuna Pink was played by Arisa Komiya, who played Yellow Buster, and would go on to play Daya Kurosawa. Kizuna Green was played by Hiroshi Tsuchita, who played Ninja Blue, and would go on to play Grisha Jaeger. And Kizuna Yellow was played by Mika Kikuchi, who played Deka Pink, so yeah, you'd think the girls would switch colors, especially considering she also played Katsuki in Mahotsukai Precure, but then you also remember she played Minerva X.
Ah, 妹、私あんたらの下についた覚えない。
Yeah, not exactly being of a pink, at least not in the G-rated ways.
Ironically, the only casting who wasn't previously a Sentai, and is actually still fairly new to the industry, was our main character for this show, Kizuna Red, Toko Asagaki. He was leading his team into their final battle, and despite being backed by the awesome vocals of freaking Akira Kushida, who sung the openings to Sun Vulcan and a good chunk of the Metal Hero series, they were doomed to face a truly great loss. Though on a bit of a side note, I really do appreciate how legit this whole setup feels, with the Kizuna 5 not really feeling too out of place in a Super Sentai lineup. Granted, their designs would probably be a little too diverse for budgetary reasons, plus I'm not sure how practical using bandages to operate their little toys would be.
I mean, I'm not saying it's unusual for a franchise that uses screwdrivers as guns and swords, but yeah, that would be kind of hard to play with, wouldn't it?
Still, the concepts and ideas were spot on, and their mech was pretty legit, to the point that Kotobukiya is already making a model kit for it.
In fact, that gorilla does look an awful lot like Gal Gorilla. Yeah, these videos are mostly just gonna be me showing off my toys, so get used to it.
Anyway, the Kizuna 5 managed to fly up to their final boss, but I guess they didn't properly glue certain parts in, as just one hit managed to take their mech out of commission. Left with no other choice, one of them would have to go at it alone.
絶対帰ってきてください。
わかったぜ。
Oh great, here come the complaints that this Red is a Gary Stew just because he kind of solos the final boss. Look, can't we give King a little bit of a break?
With that, Togo fought Bio Kawasu and took him out with one punch. Jeez, and I thought the final battle with Zed was underwhelming. However, the big bad managed to take the Red Sentai with him to the grave. This resulted in Togo getting a nice moment of literal reflection as he looked back at his career as a hero of justice.
Well, that's that. Hey, could someone tell the Yakuza Ranger to make space at the table?
Nah, of course, you knew what was coming based on just the show's title, as he got isekai'd. Thus, we jumped ahead 6 months later, which yeah, don't worry, they'll explain things later. Togo made his way to the mansion of a mage named Idra, who was looking to hire some adventurers, and she had at least 2 good reasons why people would want to work for her. However, as it turned out, she was a bit of a hard ass who would test possible candidates with a freaking golem.
Let me guess, this is written by Toshiki Inoue because he is kind of into those sort of ladies and oh, it was actually written by Atsuhiro Tomioka after he just kind of finished up Boom Booger. Interesting.
Well, before we could learn whether or not this thing had the voice of Ash Ketchum, Toko hilariously mistook it as an evil robot trying to kidnap people, which, come on dude, most Sentai villains nowadays don't bother with taking the whole human, they just drain them of their souls. Still, since it was part of his initiation test, he would have to fight anyway. Thus, after showing off his very Maji Ranger-esque strip, one of my personal favorites by the way, he took out his plastic bandage and put it in his henshin device.
You can thank Hayato Ichimonji for starting up that trend that's never, ever going to die.
Also, in case you're wondering, yeah, the music here is also very much Super Sentai, as along with the aforementioned Akira Kushida, the compositions of the show were done by Koichiro Kamiyama, who did the tunes for Time Ranger, Deca Ranger, and Zyuohger. Hell, maybe if Idra heard this music, she wouldn't have to question every single little thing.
Y'all just want me to make the most obvious references, don't you?
Sometimes when I morph, I can't help but notice this gigantic explosion right behind me for no apparent reason.
That said, it was interesting to see how Togo's Sentai mechanics seemed to affect this more traditional fantasy world, in that they did work like they normally would, but as a result, everything else couldn't keep up with them both mentally and physically, which did at least justify the old trope of the main character being OP in these sorts of stories. I mean, it just made sense, as Togo is both an experienced warrior with at least a whole season's worth of battles, and technology that far outclassed this world.
Says the lady who flashes her tits most of the time.
Regardless, and in spite of his target demographic, Idra did see the value in hiring him. Thus, for their first quest, they were going to harvest some mana metal for research purposes. With that, and inspired by her dedication to strengthen the bonds between people and magic, because that's this whole guy's gimmick, they made haste to the dungeons. There, Idra was able to show off that she was a capable mage, but Togo just had the bare equipment.
And as usual, those things are never as big as advertised. And yeah, I know this is a Kamen Rider toy, but you can't tell me that doesn't look like the Garen Rouser, right?
While exploring, the two ended up giving their backstories, with Togo's being pretty much your typical Sentai plot. Though, is it just me, or did these two evil generals look like the Yattermen? Huh, maybe they could be a part of a criminally underrated reboot. More importantly though, he did explain what he did during the half year after their final battle and his arrival in the Isekai. And to his credit, he did try everything he could to get back to Earth, but quickly realized that this world also needed his help, and that maybe he was brought here by fate for that very reason.
Okay, dude, you're at least in B tier right now. I mean, you're not quite up to Takeru or even Kai's level just yet, but you are at least above these idiots.
Meanwhile, Idra claimed that she was questing in order to build up her reputation and eventually challenge the current ruling power that had usurped her prestigious family and were ruling tyrannically with the very magics that they helped to forge. And honestly, her story was also kind of basic, at least in terms of fantasy, as she herself even admitted that it was a little childish and overly idealistic, since her father did seem to lose their title as the royal scepter in a legit battle, but Togo didn't see it as such. And funny enough, the usurper even kind of looked like a Sentai villain, so it actually acted as a pretty clever little parallel between what were essentially protagonists and stories of two different genres, Tokusatsu and fantasy. Now, I guess you could say Togo was living up to his title as the hero who binds everyone and everything together. Anyway, they eventually found the mana medals, but like any JRPG, you don't get the big items unless you win them in a boss fight.
Damn it, they're using CGI again. Okay, did someone lose another costume or something?
Still, this gave Togo the opportunity to just be a plain badass and clearly start to win over Idra, in spite of her still having a hard time keeping up with all of this Tokusatsu stuff.
There! See that explosion? I'm telling you, that was just a little one.
And of all things, she, understandably, had the hardest time figuring out the concept of the giant combining mech, which I do question too, though more on the basis on how the hell did that thing get to the Isekai when we clearly saw it back on Earth at the beginning? Was Togo able to warp it in? And if he did, can't he just use it to get back to his world? Or is it more of a conceptual mech made from like an imagination or something? Honestly, I do hope they explain this stuff later, both for mine and Yidra's sakes. Anyway, and despite being underpowered without the rest of his team, Togo managed to instantly win the battle with his mech's chest blaster. Well, I see someone is a proud graduate of the RGZ school of fighting. And with that, the episode ended with Idra deciding to register herself as an adventurer, both to learn more new magics, and of course to get closer to Togo.
This was a really damn fun first episode, where you really could feel everyone's dedication to just its concept.
Like, even putting aside the behind-the-scenes stuff with the cast and staff, the general feel of this does come off like something that Toei would make for their Tokusatsu fan club.
You might say it has a little too much fan service, but yeah, not really.
Let's just get this out of the way, there are comparisons to be made with this show and Akiba Ranger. For one thing, and while this show is truly unofficial, there's enough former and even current Super Sentai castings and staff that you could mistake this for a Tyson movie if you didn't realize it was an anime. Both shows are clearly passion projects that celebrate the franchise and genre in general, and yet also do spoof it in tasteful and fun ways. The differences of course arise in the setting and story. While isekais are a bit of a dime a dozen at this point, this show is different in that the main character is justified in being OP in ways that Tokusatsu fans can understand why. Though Togo does still have character flaws, at least inherent to being a red Sentai, like his hot-headedness, though we can also assume he at least matured after a season's worth of adventures. For him, this is probably like an epilogue to his original adventures, and yet for us, it's a fun little journey with tropes that we probably are familiar with and can get a good laugh out of. In fact, the comedy, which mostly comes from Idra's reactions, is what really holds up the show, as the action is a little lesser. I mean, it's not bad, as stuff like the Golem fight was actually quite good, but like Tokusatsu that run out of budget, they also rush through other set pieces like the giant mech fight. Though again, it's no big deal, as the show is held up by its comedy, as well as its characters, and plot. I mean, I am genuinely invested in Yidra's conflict in reclaiming her family's honor. And overall, this is just a fun first episode, especially if you're a Tokusatsu fan like me. With or without his original team, Togo seems like he's already morphing into quite the isekai hero that we all need in our lives.
Thanks for watching this first week, where we're going to try to push out all of these weekend videos.
It has been a little hectic, as we are trying to push out a lot of stuff back to back, though on the bright side, at least I don't have to stay up to get this stuff done now.
Look forward to a Kamen Rider Gav review, hopefully tomorrow. Until then, excuse me. Hey, I'm trying to do a review right now. Could you call back later?